It was a typical Wednesday morning in downtown Atlanta, and the courthouse was buzzing with its usual activity. Courtroom B, presided over by the infamous Judge Palmer, was filled with people awaiting the trial of Tina Jones. Tina was a single mother, charged with theft after being caught stealing food from a grocery store. As she stood before the judge, her 11-year-old daughter Kiara sat quietly at the defense table beside her mother's lawyer. The judge, known for his strict, no-nonsense rulings, was preparing to hand down what many expected to be another harsh sentence. Tina's lawyer had argued for leniency, citing her difficult circumstances, but Judge Palmer seemed unmoved, until Kiara stood up. "Excuse me, Your Honor." Kiara's voice was soft but firm. Judge Palmer raised an eyebrow. "Yes?" Kiara looked down, nervous, but she spoke clearly. "I'm hungry." The courtroom fell silent. Kiara's words hung in the air. Her mother turned toward her, a look of surprise and pain in her eyes. Tina knew that Kiara had been hungry before. They often had to make do with little to no food, but to hear her say it in front of a judge and a room full of strangers was heartbreaking. Judge Palmer sat back in his chair, visibly taken aback. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice softer than before. Kiara repeated, "I'm hungry." The judge stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The courtroom, usually bustling with murmurs and whispers, was completely still. Everyone waited to see how the notoriously tough Judge Palmer would respond. Kiara's life had never been easy. She lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of Atlanta with her mother. Tina worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, but it was never enough. Rent was always behind, food was scarce, and bills piled up. Despite the hardships, Kiara was a bright and optimistic girl. She loved school and was always eager to learn. But lately, even school had become difficult. It was hard to focus on math or reading when her stomach growled constantly, and her clothes were too small because they couldn't afford new ones. Tina had tried her best, but after losing one of her jobs due to illness, things spiraled. That's what led to the desperate act of stealing food. Now, Tina stood in court, facing the possibility of jail time, and Kiara was scared. Scared of what would happen to them. Scared of being left alone. Judge Palmer's stern demeanor softened, but only for a moment. He was known for his tough rulings, and he had built a career on being hard on crime. He had seen many defendants try to appeal to his emotions before, and he had long since learned to ignore such pleas. But something about Kiara's simple statement broke through. Maybe it was the innocence in her voice, or the vulnerability she showed by speaking up in a room full of adults. Either way, the judge found himself questioning his usual approach. He cleared his throat and spoke again. "Court will take a recess." Everyone was shocked, especially Tina's lawyer, who had been bracing for the worst. As the bailiff announced the recess, Judge Palmer gave an order that stunned the room. "Bring this child something to eat." The courtroom, still buzzing with confusion, watched in silence as a clerk quickly exited the room to fulfill the judge's unusual request. Judge Palmer leaned back in his chair, his face calm but contemplative. He glanced at Kiara, who sat quietly next to her mother, her eyes wide with surprise. Tina, too, was stunned. Never in her wildest dreams had she expected the judge to pause the trial just because her daughter admitted she was hungry. The courtroom recess dragged on. When the clerk returned with a tray of food, a sandwich, fruit, and juice, all eyes were on Kiara. The judge gestured for the bailiff to bring the food to the young girl, who accepted it hesitantly, unsure of how to react in such a formal setting. Tina reached over to her daughter, wiping away a tear as she watched Kiara eat. The media in the courtroom whispered amongst themselves, taking quick notes and snapping pictures. The mood shifted from anticipation of a harsh sentence to curiosity about what would happen next. Judge Palmer maintained his composure, though it was clear that this small, seemingly insignificant moment had shifted something within him. The quiet sound of Kiara eating filled the large courtroom. It was an image no one expected to witness in such a place, a courtroom known for tough sentences and strict rulings. Tina watched her daughter eat as if it were the most significant meal of her life, because in a way, it was. To be able to eat without fear, in a place where punishment seemed inevitable, was a rare moment of relief. The judge's gaze never wavered from Kiara. His mind raced with thoughts. He had presided over many cases involving poverty, theft, and broken families, but none had struck him quite like this. The honesty of the girl's hunger, the innocence with which she spoke, broke through his rigid sense of justice. When Kiara finished her meal, she glanced up nervously, her small frame still shaking slightly. Tina squeezed her hand, silently reassuring her that everything was going to be alright. The bailiff cleared the tray, and the judge called for the court to resume. "Thank you, Kiara," Judge Palmer said, his voice softer than before. "You may sit with your mother now." The courtroom held its breath, waiting to see how he would proceed. Judge Palmer cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "I've presided over many cases in this courtroom," he began, addressing everyone. "I've seen people make mistakes, some small, some large, and I've delivered sentences according to the law. But today, I've seen something that has reminded me of why this system exists in the first place. To serve justice, not just punishment." He paused, glancing toward Tina and Kiara. "Tina Jones, I'm postponing your sentencing. Instead, this court will order an investigation into your family's circumstances. I want to understand the full picture of what led to this moment. You and your daughter deserve more than just a verdict. You deserve help." Tina's eyes widened in disbelief. This was not the outcome anyone had expected. The lawyers, reporters, and even the court staff were stunned. Was Judge Palmer, the most feared judge in the city, offering compassion? He continued, "I'm assigning social services to review your case. They will look into your living situation, your employment, and your ability to care for your daughter. In the meantime, I will personally ensure that resources are provided to help you both get back on your feet." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Reporters scrambled to take notes, realizing they had just witnessed something unprecedented. Judge Palmer, known for his firm hand, was showing mercy, and not just mercy, but a willingness to actively help. Within hours, news of the courtroom event spread across the city. Local news stations broadcast the story under headlines like, "Tough Judge's Heartwarming Gesture Leaves Courtroom Stunned and Judge Palmer Offers Compassion to Hungry Child in Court." The story went viral. Footage of Kiara's simple confession, "I'm hungry," was played repeatedly on national news channels, turning her into a symbol of innocence in the face of systemic struggles. Social media was flooded with posts praising the judge's decision, with people from across the country weighing in on the story. People began calling Judge Palmer's chambers, thanking him for showing kindness where many expected cold justice. Some critics questioned whether it was appropriate for a judge to intervene in this way, but the overwhelming response was positive. Kiara's story became a symbol of hope, and the media couldn't get enough of it. As the case moved forward, social services began their investigation into Kiara and Tina's life. It didn't take long for them to discover just how dire the family's situation had been. Tina had lost her job due to a chronic illness that left her unable to work for long periods. She had applied for government assistance, but due to bureaucratic delays, the support never came in time. Living in one of Atlanta's toughest neighborhoods, Tina struggled to keep Kiara safe and well-fed. The investigation revealed how the system had failed them, from lost paperwork at social services to Tina being denied medical care. Each layer of their hardship was more heartbreaking than the last. The investigation report made its way back to Judge Palmer, who read it with a growing sense of unease. It became clear that Tina's theft wasn't an act of malice, but desperation. The judge knew this was bigger than just one family. It was a systemic issue that he couldn't ignore. Judge Palmer wasn't one to dwell on emotion, but Kiara's case made him reflect deeply on his own life. He had grown up in a similar neighborhood, raised by a single mother who worked long hours to make ends meet. For years, he had distanced himself from his past, focusing on his career and climbing the ranks in the legal system. But Kiara's situation brought back memories of his childhood, the days when his own mother struggled to put food on the table. Judge Palmer realized that, in his quest to uphold the law, he had lost sight of the humanity behind the cases he presided over. For the first time in a long time, he questioned whether justice was truly being served by the way he had been running his courtroom. He decided to make a change. As the story continued to gain attention, People from the community began to reach out to Tina and Kiara. Local organizations offered support in the form of food, clothing, and financial assistance. A nearby church organized a charity drive, raising funds to help Tina cover her medical expenses and pay off overdue bills. The community response was overwhelming. Strangers offered to babysit Kiara, drive Tina to doctor's appointments, and even help fix their rundown apartment. What had started as a simple plea for food had blossomed into a movement of compassion and solidarity. Even outside Atlanta, people were inspired by Kiara's story. Donations poured in from all over the country, and a crowdfunding campaign raised enough money to give Tina and Kiara a fresh start. With the outpouring of support from the community, Tina began to see a path forward. She accepted the help being offered, starting therapy to deal with the stress of her situation and seeking legal advice on how to rebuild her life. Her charges for theft were reduced, and Judge Palmer granted her probation instead of jail time. More importantly, Tina was given access to resources that allowed her to regain control of her life. She found a new job, one that accommodated her health condition, and was able to pay off her debts. Kiara, once quiet and shy, started thriving in school again. The family was far from wealthy, but for the first time in a long while, they were stable. Kiara's case sparked more than just media attention. It ignited a push for change in the welfare and justice systems. Local lawmakers, activists, and community leaders began discussing the need for reforms that would prevent other families from falling into the same traps Tina and Kiara had experienced. Judge Palmer, inspired by the impact of his decision, became an advocate for these reforms. He spoke publicly about the importance of empathy in the courtroom and the need for the justice system to consider the root causes of crime, not just the crimes themselves. His words carried weight, and soon other judges began rethinking their own approach to sentencing, especially in cases involving poverty and survival. As the months passed, Kiara's life changed in ways she never could have imagined. The girl who had once been too shy to speak up in class now found herself in the spotlight. She became a symbol of hope for children in similar situations, her story used as an example in classrooms, churches, and community centers across the country. With the stability of her new life, Kiara excelled in school. She was no longer distracted by hunger or the worry that her mother might be taken away from her. Teachers praised her for her hard work and resilience. Kiara even began volunteering at local food banks, helping families who were going through struggles like hers.